to where folks are calling and you're being recorded. So please don't turn your cameras off because of that. But I'm curious to hear where everyone is calling or joining from. Of course, we're Bay Area OD Network, but there's a couple of us who are not in the Bay currently. I'm in Philadelphia right now. So it's 9 p.m. and I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Um, Feel free to pop in the chat where you're calling from. You can unmute yourself for now if you'd like. We got Oakland, San Jose, Sacramento, North Bay, is it San Rafael or San Rafael? It's San Rafael. That's okay. I've never been. Where's El Dorado Hills?
It's outside of Sacramento.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. North Miami Beach, nice. Davis, Fairfield. Okay. And another question I'm curious about, how'd you hear about the event today? Lakeshore. Lakeshore is in Oakland. We got our newsletter, you got the emails. Okay, so they're working. I sent those out, so thank you for opening them and thank you for registering today. All right, I'll just give us another meeting and then I am co-host, so I should be able to share my screen with you all. All right. I'm gonna kick us off and get us started as long as I can figure out how to share my screen. Okay. You all can see this, right?
Yeah.
This is such a silly question, but how do I make this bigger?
Click slideshow.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here this evening. Welcome to What's the State of OD? Just a little context for you. This is a topic that's been on my mind for the past few months. For a number of different reasons. There's been a lot of workforce development changes, a lot of legislative changes affecting our field, as well as higher ed changes. And it's kind of like, what's the state of the union, but what's the state of organization development? So I'm really happy to have two folks on our panel today. I'll tell you a little bit about them in a second, but first I just want to open us up with a few general announcements from Bay Area OD Network. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Taylor Thompson. I sit on the board of directors for Bay Area ODN. We have a few other board members on the call today, but we're really glad to be here with you all, and we're really glad you came out for our event this evening. So just a reminder of our purpose, Bay Area ODN is here to cultivate a strong collaborative community of practice in the Bay Area to advance the field of OD and serve our regional community. I'm very excited to not only host this event, but give you some information about our upcoming event next month. So it'll be a continuation of this conversation, but in person. And it will be in collaboration with USF, University of San Francisco. They are sunsetting their ODL program next year. So we're launching a community of practice event. It'll be October 23rd from 2 to 5. Registration tickets are currently available and there's still early bird pricing. So it's only $10 through Friday. And then I believe it goes up to $25. So it is limited to 80 people. We have about 30 people registered right now. So if you're interested, I would definitely take advantage of the early bird pricing before the end of the week. Here's some highlights from our last event. We have a really great time when we're in person together, as you can see from these pictures. And I wanted to poll you for another upcoming event. So I don't have too many details to share right now, but we're planning some type of leadership summit in collaboration with a few other organizations next year. So I'm just curious in terms of day of the week preference for folks. Do you prefer events that are weekday? Do you like weekend events, or do you not have a preference at all? Like I said, this would be in person, likely in the East Bay. So please share your preference and just stay tuned for more details. I'm waiting for about 4 more people to respond. Okay, give it a couple more seconds. There we go. Okay, I think we can end it.
Yeah, that might be everybody, because I think I created it, so I can't vote in it, and then
Oh.
we have two presenters.
Okay, all right, perfect. And it looks like folks like events during the week, so that's good to know. Thank you. All right. One last update. We are still accepting new board members. We have one additional director seat open. We're excited to bring on a new board member in the next couple months. But yes, we have one other position available, and then there's also project leadership opportunities available. Here is just a short testimony from Fruck, who is our current president. But definitely encourage you all to get involved, engage with us. It's a great opportunity if you are going through a career transition, or also if you're just looking for additional leadership experience. Feel free to contact any of our board members directly, or you can reach out through admin@bayareaodn.org. And here we are. I'm ready to kick us off. So what's the state of OD? I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute, but I did want to pull up contact information for our marvelous panelists this evening. Feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn or reach out via email if you'd like to connect. And I'm going to stop sharing now so I can introduce them. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. So I am going to start with Kevin. Kevin Reese is a seasoned HR leader with over a decade of experience driving talent management, leadership development, and organizational effectiveness in Fortune 500 companies. As a senior HR business partner at Amazon, he supports a multi-$100 million global business in devices, operations, and supply chain, where he aligns people strategies with key business objectives. With a focus on data-driven decision-making, diversity outcomes, and leadership development, Kevin has spearheaded initiatives that have improved succession planning, retention, and organizational design. He is currently pursuing a Doctor of Engineering in Engineering Management from the George Washington University, with his research focused on leveraging engineering management principles to enhance talent management strategies. So come November, we'll be calling him Dr. Reese. Well, I'll give you both a chance to say something after the next introduction. Jeff Branch, Dr. Jeff Branch, excuse me, is principal consultant with Partnering for Change Consulting Group. He has over 30 years of experience as an organization development and effectiveness consultant, executive coach, and adult education practitioner. Jeff also served as program chair of 3 graduate programs at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, including Organization Development and Leadership, which is my alma mater, Public Health Management and Administration, and Nonprofit Leadership and Population Health Management. He focuses on integrating theory into the practice of OD and leadership by designing and facilitating a highly synergized experiential action learning curriculum. He consults with government and nonprofit organizations on strategic business issues, including diversity, equity, and inclusion as a critical integrative aspect of his practice. His community service includes serving as a board member with community organizations and pro bono consulting with other nonprofit orgs. Jeff holds a doctorate degree in education, master's degree in organization development and leadership, and bachelor's degree in business administration marketing. I did not know that before. So welcome. I will open it up to you two to add to my introduction or share some thoughts before we go into our questions.
Yeah, no, pretty excited about the opportunity. I also want to add that Jeff is also my fraternity brother. I just realized that by looking at his at his LinkedIn page. So I know this is definitely going to be a good night. 2 Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity brothers.
Oh boy, here we
Great.
go.
All right. All right. Well, that's good news, and certainly want to connect. Actually, Kevin, I was thinking whatever support that you needed, but you're almost done, so we could celebrate together. And then I'm the person that's in Miami Beach. I'm gonna actually be flying back to Philly tomorrow. I go back and forth, so that was my commute for a long time, also. And then Taylor, one of my favorites, for sure. So I couldn't turn down this invitation. And really pleased, had a couple of times opportunities to come out to the Bay Area, especially, and I can't remember what year this was, we had the ODN conference out in the Bay Area. So that was a great opportunity.
Awesome. Okay, so just general housekeeping for us. Please mute yourselves, which I think everyone's muted. Although I do want it to be a conversational panel in a way. So I have a list of questions for us to go through over the next 45 minutes or so, but I definitely want all of our attendees and guests to be engaged in the conversation. So if you have thoughts, please pop them in the chat. We want to integrate you in this conversation as well. So to kick us off, I wanted to start by thinking about the relationship between HR and OD functions within organizations. How do the two of you think that HR and OD can best collaborate? And I'll start with you, Kevin.
Yeah. First, I think that HR and OD are they're complementary of each other, right? Whereas HR focuses on the management or talent on a day-to-day basis, helping employees to leverage their specific talents in the organization. While opposite of that, OD drives those systemic changes and organizational effectiveness type things. And so how they work together or best collaborate by aligning on organizational goals, also by sharing data-driven insights, and then co-creating change initiatives. I think HR provides the workforce analytics and the talent management expertise, while OD takes that and then designs the interventions that drive the long-term agility or innovation that we look for within our organizations. And then they best collaborate on top of all that by having that regular feedback loop between both functions. And that continues, it drives that continuous improvement and that organizational alignment that we're looking for.
Great. I would certainly concur, around complementary, and then just the way I grew up, I was thinking in the field. In particular, I was in HR OD, and that's 30 years ago. So it's been an evolving relationship. I remember 30, 35 years ago, there was tension in particular that we had to navigate across both disciplines. And for the life of me, I didn't understand why there needed to be the tension. But if you think about the dynamics around identity, it certainly was one of the things that came out. But if you went to some of the ODN conferences, little digs from the OD side to HR would come out and said, well, we know what we're doing. HR doesn't know what they're doing. And I'm like, wait a minute. We're in the field where we're trying to be collaborative. We're trying to engage. We're trying to build community. Everybody should be brought in such a way that the disciplines should be valued, the contributions should be valued, for sure. And then thankfully, when I talked about the evolution, in most spaces that I'm in now, HROD are partnering and collaborating effectively. And I really appreciate that because of my own background, I'm trying to navigate that tension for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, really. So and I think it depends on the company, right? So for Amazon, all of those functions for us, talent management, OD, HR, or we call it PXT, people experience and technology. All of us sit under one senior VP, Beth Galetti. But then I've been in other companies. I managed in UPS for a long time as well. And we sat under two separate VPs. So it really just depends on the corporate structure. And when I started my career in the oil and gas industry, the HR person was also the OD person. You kind of had to have that cross-functional expertise. So I do think it is a lot of the disciplines, while they are separate, they can obviously operate and function separately. A lot of those skills are really cross-functional. There's a lot that you can utilize between one or the other or both.
Yeah, and if we added another thread there, I was thinking you'll notice a lot of MBA programs that are integrating OD and pretty strongly in the curriculum. So there's that intentionality. People are more familiar with OD now than they've ever been. And it's just really interesting because I think there's still value in having it as two separate disciplines, but having a mindset of collaboration and partnership.
Yeah, especially post-COVID, right? Like where we were just talking about it before the call started. As businesses are looking to set themselves apart from their competitors, now post-COVID, people are looking for more than just promotion and all those things, but they're looking at how they're effective in their own careers. Not only how they're contributing to the company, but how the company contributed to them. And so as companies have started to set up those separate shops between OD and HR, you're seeing some of the ones who do it better also have a competitive edge.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think I approach work as HR with an OD mindset because I started in HR, and they're sisters to me, right? Like I was interested in OD based off of the work that I was doing in HR and the change that the organization I was at the time was going through. So they're so integrated to me. However, it wasn't until I left that organization that I realized there were even more silos. So I started working places where HR and talent acquisition, which is where I fell, they were not within the same vertical or department, which was so foreign to me because talent acquisition very much is human resources in the world I come from. So I don't understand. I guess the bigger the organization gets, it's the need for, a more robust system, and for these silos. But like you said, Kevin, I think that differentiates um, the powers, the players who are powerful, right? And those who are just resurfacing the same challenges year after year.
Yes. So like for Amazon, we are very separate. Like there's a TA function, there's a talent management function, there's an OD function, there's generalist HR. Obviously for us, all those other functions fall into the specialist space. But what I like to tell my team, and I learned this from my mentor, in order for us to be effective in the generalist space, right, you have to have a close partnership with the specialist space, because they affect our roles more often than we affect theirs. And
Mm,
so spending that time. So depending on what the team is, like my TA team or partners, I meet with them on a weekly basis. My OD teams, I meet with on a bi-weekly basis. So it just kind of depends on how their work affects ours. Depends on how often we collaborate, but collaboration is very much so important.
mhm,
Yeah, Kevin, just the way you said it, I was thinking about one area of practice that I really wasn't that familiar with, but it had a big impact. I was with an investment and financial services company around compensation. So
mm,
I had to rely on and partner with certainly the folks that were in compensation. And then as an organization, we had to really think through how do we attract the best? How do we keep the best? And really what you were talking about, Taylor, around the selection talent management process too.
mhm,
I mean, when you think about the people functions, it's so much, right? And so you can't be a SME in everything, right?
mhm,
It's because it's just so much. You wouldn't have the time to learn it all and be effective at it all. So that's why it's so important to have those separate functions, and that they are effective and efficient.
mhm. I don't know how much you can share with us, Kevin, but in terms of your initiatives and strategic plans that roll up to the top, do they ensure there's alignment across the different functions?
Yes, we call it OP1, and it is the bane of my existence. It is a doc that we write, one time a year. But that doc can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months to write because of the amount of collaboration, right? On what each teams are doing, how they're tracking to their goals from the previous time frame, what those goals are going to be moving forward based on their their ability to meet those previous goals, all those things. And it's a big undertaking, but what we found, at least specifically for the company that I work for, it's effective. It helps us know the roadmap, right? Amazon loves to say that we try to keep a day one culture, and that's super important for us to know, day after day, what's our North Star. But it's a lot
Mm,
of work. It's a lot of work getting there, because there's so many players.
nice, thank you. So transitioning to our next question, from your experience, what are some of the most pressing challenges organizations face today that OD or HR practitioners can help address?
You want me to go first?
Go
If I
ahead,
think
yes.
about it, and I don't think this is a big surprise to anyone. It's around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, anti-racism work. Certainly, especially with the pushback, the socio-political dynamics that are happening across across the world, across the nation. And then, especially in this space, I think it's really critical that the skills that we have, we're able to leverage and bring people together to have robust conversations where there's transparency, there's stories, there's opportunities for people to engage with each other. Um, there's work that try to really tie my work to from the Presencing Institute, Otto Scharmer's work, and then Kelvie Bird talks about building a container. And then one of the dynamics around how do you build a container in this space where there are so many different polarities that we're facing right now, certainly in the political realm, certainly organizationally. How do you build that container where people will bring their best selves to work? And I think we're positioned as OD HR professionals that we're really essential in creating that or co-creating that container for practice, for transparency, for openness, the opportunity to really make a difference in your organizations, then also make a difference in the regions and also in the nation and the world. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll add to that. I think I have five, and then one of them being DEI. Obviously we have the geopolitical environment that, has its eyes set on DEI, and what they think it means, and how it impacts. But for others that I think are super important, rapid technological change. If you're like me, I consider myself to be still pretty young, but I am technology adverse. I am one of the few people I think that still takes notes in a notebook. I love the feel of writing. So I find myself challenged and my team having to push me forward on the technology. But rapid technological change, OD practitioners, good OD practitioners, and HR practitioners, I think can help build the agile cultures and frameworks that are necessary to adapt to those new technologies. The second thing, talent shortages and retention. I think good practitioners can help to companies design strategies that will, to Dr. Branch's point, enhance the employee engagement, drive leadership development, but then more importantly, as the employee pools change, have good succession planning, right, which is super important. And then the last two, organizational resilience, and then remote and hybrid work. Organizational resilience, OD teams and HR teams, people functions can help organizations to navigate the economic uncertainties by fostering that flexible and responsive structure that we talked about earlier. Right? Amazon just announced yesterday the full return to office 5 days a week. And so how teams can, I know, Kelsey, I see you. It's a challenge, right? But OD and HR teams, because there are so many decisions that are outside of our control. But our teams are the ones that kind of help to ease the transitions or the change management when those decisions are made by other stakeholders. And then of course that flows right into the remote and hybrid work. OD teams and HR teams can help to redesign workflows and cultures that support effective collaboration across whatever the spaces, whether it be digital spaces through remote work or physical spaces, like what we're returning to.
Yeah, this is a lot, right? So my follow-up question with all of these initiatives, right, is how does OD demonstrate their value in all of this? Because I'm thinking of one organization in specific that I used to work at. They've gone through some workforce reduction, and part of that workforce reduction was the OD team who should be there to help manage this change, right? So it's like if any time, if not any other time, this is the time you need the folks that you just let go. So how maybe either internally or externally, how do you demonstrate that value and allyship to executive leadership and people leaders?
That one is
Yeah.
always a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's always a challenge. It's just that echo. I think the biggest thing is What Kevin was talking about, actually, that we demonstrate that we know the business as well as anyone else.
Mm,
We understand the metrics, we understand delivering results, the dynamic of people and results. We have to definitely do that. There was some work that was done some years ago. I think there's still probably some literature out there. It was called the Global Committee for the Future of OD. And that's the biggest thing that the chief executive said, that if we needed any skills or enhancing any skills, that understanding the business was the critical skill that
mm,
the OD professionals needed to have in their toolkit. And that's certainly one of the things that's a differentiator for sure. I think the other thing that was so interesting, Taylor and Kevin, what you were talking about, especially with the technology, the AI, the chat GPT, all that kind of stuff going on, right? I've certainly felt like I was a resistor primarily because of the dynamics of, well, who's programming this? And is there a bias that's already in all the stuff that, everybody was talking about?
mhm,
However, been leveraging some of a number of the tools that have made the job easier.
mhm,
And I had to, as a researcher and engagement, I had to test some things out. If I put this in the chat GPT or the AI, whatever, my colleague, she does a lot of that stuff for me. And then I'm looking and I'm like, wait a minute. I did a test. I'm like, well, these are the same themes and things that I saw, and she just had to put it in and they're popping right out. They're
mhm.
popping right out. So it's actually seeing the technology as a friend, but still holding on to wondering around the programming biases that are actually taking place there. I'm still wondering about that, but certainly have seen the benefits around getting some of the work done at this point.
And I think M Bowen really spoke to the core of it. It's one of the challenges that we continue to have. The reality is that people functions are not they're not a profit center, right? And so we don't make the company any money. But you said perfectly, we do help the company lose less money in a
Mhm,
lot of ways by helping to create a culture that's conducive for innovation and growth, and all of um, the curious and think big type things that we want from our employees. But one of the things that our SVP talks about all the time is also being responsible, because we recognize that our space is a it's a cost, right? A cost with no profit attached to it. And so for us to make sure that our business doesn't outgrow the business. And
mm,
that part is really tricky, right? So you think about in the pandemic, right? As companies like Amazon just grew exponentially, that means all those support teams and COEs grew exponentially as well. And so, but we also saw, as a result, right, some of the largest cuts to a lot of the businesses were some of those same teams. And so just trying to counter your value with also being, responsible with, headcount and all of those things. Whereas the businesses aren't always expected to do more with less. For our functions, we are, right? We're expected to do more with less, be more efficient with less, be more effective with less.
Right. The other thing, thanks, Kevin, because I was thinking the other thing is to have a sponsor at the very top,
mhm,
really the CEO that believes in
mhm,
the work that you do. I remember one organization I was in, and actually took me under his wing. So I learned a lot of OD from him. And one of the things that he said right off the bat, he said, Jeff, the last group, exactly what you were saying, Taylor, that I'm going to release when we're going through turmoil, really are my OD folks. They're extremely valuable. Um, and it's one of the reasons why I try to move people around so people can really learn the business and
mhm,
be even more effective.
mm,
And that person had a dynamic effect on me as I watched the spaces and how he navigated when he came on board. it was just amazing.
Yeah. I think that's a great example of allyship. I think we talk about allies in so many different ways, in various areas of life, right? But I think that's a um, good example of allyship in practice within an organization.
Yeah.
We touched on, oh, we're going to add something, Kevin, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, for example, for us, where a lot of companies are, cutting their DEIs, their DI team and HR teams exponentially, while there were some cuts, like Amazon is doubling down, because it's important. All right, it's important work, in order to drive that environment that we're trying to get.
Mhm. Yeah. We kind of touched on this a little bit, around how technology is impacting the practice of OD. You talked about some of the opportunities to make our work more efficient, Jeff. Do you think it presents any challenges for us outside of the rapidly evolving technology that we have?
I think there's the still another opportunity, especially for us, that we see the technology as an opportunity to develop new skills, to develop the practice, especially if you have an organization that really believes in the technology. You can't be on the side a naysayer when you're trying to
Yep.
build partnership. All right. You're going to have the mindset of test. If we think about OD, we're with human dynamics, we're encouraging people to test, to learn, to grow. We have to model that ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge is not over indexing on technology, right? Figuring out what the right balance is between technology and human centric approaches. I think three main challenges come to mind when I think about myself, as it relates to technology. One, data overload, right? Before, like, Amazon literally has a report for everything, any and everything I can potentially think of. Um, but with having so much access, it becomes, mind-boggling at times, and it becomes hard to determine what's the important thing because there's so much to look at. So the data overload is one thing, but also the challenge of the human element, right? You don't want to over rely on tech because as a result, you may neglect that personal and that relational aspect that OD and HR are known for, right? That's our bread and butter. Um, and then the last thing is the change fatigue, right? Because
Mm.
technology, it's inexhaustible, right? You can work it, work it, work it. It can always continue to produce um and provide. And so that change fatigue, right? The continuous tech driven changes can overwhelm your employees, right? Can overwhelm your teams. And so having that good balance requires that careful management to maintain that good engagement and that good balance.
Yeah.
There was a
And
question about higher ed too. I was thinking, and I know we're going to touch on it a
mhm.
little bit, but I was thinking one of the perfect examples. Um, my programs were under the School of Psychology, School of Professional and Applied Psychology at PCOM. And one of the challenges, especially right before the pandemic and the pandemic, was well, before the pandemic, people were using their phones and and one of the biggest challenges was like the university was trying to put in rules around using your phone in a classroom because we want you to be totally focused. So, and that's a professor-centric dynamic.
Mhm.
However, one of the things that was so interesting about it was that people were accessing data when we were designing group work for them to do. They were accessing data right at their fingertips.
Mhm.
And it was just it was an amazing dynamic. And if you think about being student-centered or adults, learner-centered, um, why not leverage all the tools at their disposal to come up with the best solution or
Yep.
the best opportunity to come up with a solution?
No,
Yep.
you talked about that. I'm an adjunct professor. We talked about that earlier. And that's my little off the table job. And like I encourage my students. You mentioned just Chat GPT, and I tell them like, hey, like there are so many different resources that are out there. I think it's Bane or something like that. Tools that are available to them to help, right? Because what we see with the pandemic or the result of the pandemic and the challenges with the school systems, a lot of our students just they don't write well, right? And so leveraging those tools and showing them that hey, there's a balance between utilizing these tools to enhance your work and not using it as a representation of your work. And that's the balance that I'm trying to strike with my students now. You know, the integrity of and the responsibility of using those type of tools versus you know the output.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I see one of the challenges technology has created for us, but also COVID created for us was remote work. So I've gone back and forth about my feelings for remote work over the past 4 years because I really longed for that in-person connection during the pandemic. It was one of the things I enjoyed about the place I worked at the time. And when I was no longer in person, I realized I don't know if I really like this work as much if I'm not the people I enjoy working with, right? But since then, I see the beauty in hybrid work. I think the challenge that we're tackling, if we think about your very current situation at Amazon, Kevin, is now we're feeling forced to go back. But we've made all these lifestyle changes, family changes. We've learned to be productive in new ways. So I'm really interested. I always say this that I can't wait to see the case studies that people write. I should probably write the case study myself. I'm so interested to look back at this time in a few years and see like how did we come out of it and what actually sticks because this will this 5-day work week really stick, right? Or is this just something employers can leverage because we're still in a very terrible job market? So they know that folks want to keep their jobs, so they are going to move back to where they need to move back to so they can work because the chances of them finding work elsewhere are not extremely high right now. Or will we see folks who are just we had what did they call it during the pandemic, the great resignation, so we might see that again next year, right? I'm one of the people who was impacted by the job market, so I pivoted to entrepreneurship, and I know a lot of people who did that in the past couple years. So I'm very intrigued to see again, like I said, what sticks and how we'll look back at this time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say that because there are studies. There's a recent study that I read from HBR that actually talks about Gen Z in particular.
Mm.
Um, they don't care if they have a job. They don't like it, they're gonna quit. uh, and I admire it, right? Because I'm right on the end of the millennials, and so I'm kind of in that space, like, hey, go to a job and you stick to it, you figure it out. However, I'm too interested in what the outcomes will be. I don't think that it will be what companies anticipate. I don't think that they'll get the high numbers of return to office that they expect. And that may be their, you know, their underlying reason for it all. I don't know that. Amazon gods, I don't know that. But I do recognize that people are post-pandemic are in a different space than they were before. That they're making different choices for their lives. And so it will be really interesting. But I index on that. I don't think it'll be the outcome that a lot of companies are thinking.
Yeah, and even thinking about that, we were talking, folks, we were talking before we actually got started, is involving, thinking about what we do, OD, involving your people in this discussion around what's the best way to approach it. And one organization, actually, Taylor, was you were doing work with us, one organization, one of the key questions we asked after all the other questions, or probably in the midst of all the other questions, um, during the pandemic, I think we did that in 2022, was what is the ideal hybrid workspace? And we had this conversation with a whole bunch of, I think we did about 14 retreats with this organization with different departments and asked that question. And the answer um, demonstrated commitment from the staff, innovation, creativity, and it gave them, the organization, I think, enhanced confidence that people would still show up and be, because the data showed they were as productive and maybe even more so in different cases, because lots of times, as you realize, you don't turn off the clock.
Mhm.
You just work differently.
Yep.
Um, and I have to go back and double check with the organization, but they felt like that was a satisfying resolution around, around the pressure of how do we bring people in? And then one of the dynamics that was really powerful for them, they came up with a solution that they would come together probably every 2, 3 months quarterly, as a full team, to really promote the in-person, the relationship building, everything else, to really address the issue around, um, does collaboration actually still happen as powerfully if you're fully remote? So
Yeah.
they use it as a test case. They really use
Mhm.
it as a test case.
And it's interesting too, because I think the size matters. Because at first I thought it was, wholly a cost thing, right? And that, if enough people say, "Hey, I'm not coming," then the companies will rethink. But you look at some of the larger companies in and out of tech, and they're actually spending more money to get people into the office, and so you know that it's not necessarily a cost thing, but it's truly something that they believe in for whatever reason. I'll say from my own personal experience, having both worked um, remote and in person, I think with my previous team, because we were all in different locations, I didn't see the benefit of in-person work because there were minimal opportunities for us to be in person because we were all scattered across the country. However, the team that I support now, we're in one place. And so I do see the benefits of day-to-day collaboration. I see the output much quicker than I saw when I was supporting a team that was global and that was situated globally. So I see it. I think it is a uniqueness that companies have to address. But just like we talked about before, it's sometimes easier, the larger the company, to just do a one size fits all because it takes more work and you'll never really please everybody because everybody's situation is so unique.
Mhm.
So you kind of try to deal with what's going to impact the majority of your group and with the thought process that minority group will come along. But as a counter to that, I like to tell people about their careers, that your career is like building a box, right? Every role, every role, promotion, all those things, they're just another side of the box. And so as companies make changes, you may find that it no longer fits the side of the box that you're building. And so it may be
Mhm.
your opportunity to transition, to your point, Taylor, right, to entrepreneurship, something else that's more fulfilling right now so that you can continue to build your box.
Yeah. To me, it really is all about the intentionality of the employer. And I think many employers have done it as a Band-Aid fix, because they don't know what the heck is going on or they have poor leadership, so they want to send everybody back. Um, as we were talking before, there's so many benefits to people being in person. Like there's benefits you just can't argue. The collaboration that you do in person, it just that in-person impact is completely different, right? But the impacts or the benefits, the value for someone who has flexibility to be remote, for families, for the environment. Hello, we don't have to drive to work. Do you know what that means for our world? Like, again, just um an argument you really can't make. So I think it falls in the intent. Um, I've seen some organizations get it right. I have a friend who works for GitLab, which is a software company. And they're 100% remote. They're a global organization. No offices exist. Though I do think if their employees voice that they would like an office space, they provide like some resources for that. But they come together once a week as a global company. So I think this year they had their offsite in Vegas for a week. And then I think by teams they do maybe semi-annual offsites as well. So again, I think it's the intent, right? What's important to leadership. And like you said, it can be a one size fit all, but I think in those one size fit all situations, we see why one size actually does not fit at all.
I also think there's what's the word we want to use? Exceptions that
Mhm.
based on skill set, the leader. I'm almost sure that some of the leaders are making decisions. I don't want to lose this person, and probably will
Yep.
um, people and their ability to bring them at least their full selves, no matter how they show up for work. They'll
Yep.
still protect them.
Yep. I've seen that in 3 different organizations where I worked for. The first, there was no remote work policy. It didn't exist because people couldn't do it. There were about like 3 people within the organization who somehow worked out of state. And then we magically adopted this policy once COVID forced this too. And then even within a couple other organizations, post-pandemic, everyone was returning to the office, but you got these top billers who can work from wherever, because like, back to our point earlier, they're the revenue generators, right? So we want to keep them happy. We don't want them to leave. We're just not going to talk about why they're treated differently than everyone else, which if you think about the impact of the work on the other side, right? Now you're ruffling feathers and people don't feel that this is an equitable environment. So yeah, we're not bashing Amazon, but we'll have this conversation in about a year and see if there's still 5 days in the office. Um, okay, transition
We
into
love a good case study.
yes.
We love a good case study.
Transitioning into the next question, I'm really curious about some of the work that you both have done. So I was hoping you can share an example of a successful intervention that you've been involved in, and tell us what made it effective. And Jeff, why don't you kick us
Sure,
off?
sure. There's a couple of different examples, but I want to hone in on this one because it was a relationship that started. Um, I'll name the organization because we co-authored an article in the AI Practitioner. It's the University City Science Center in Philly. Um, and one of the reasons that they called us, it was you know, all of us experienced it, faced it, the George Floyd murder, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and certainly others. But as an organization, they didn't know what to do. And one of the things that was interesting about this was that this organization in the University City of Philadelphia, uh, there's a historical context of displacing um, indigenous people, and then also it was called the Black Bottom area in Philadelphia to build. So one of the things that was important for them was to figure out how they could be better corporate citizens learn from the way of work, learn from the experiences. So they brought me on board along with a colleague. Some of you might know her name is Eileen Wasserman. So we were doing that work together. Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And one of the biggest things that came out of it was certainly the opportunity to integrate OD. And then the sponsor was the senior HR leader there. So we had an opportunity to do some really deep work. And our intention going in was to look at the business that they were involved in. And we used three intersecting circles around the importance of integrating DEIB, anti-racism with culture and with strategy. So it became alive to them why it was important for them, and they were living it every day because um, every once in a while or pretty consistently, depending upon what was going on, people were talking about the history of the Science Center, UPenn, Drexel University, displacement, all of that was going on. But our approach was to use appreciative inquiry as one of the foundation points. So we had people that we interviewed. We actually had the DEI committee go through a process of learning how to do it. So we went through the
Mm.
process together. And then it was amazing because in the spirit of collaboration and partnership, people were thirsty for learning. They loved the experience, and they went out into the organization using the AI protocols that we co-developed together in the organization. Um, that what made it effective is that we were able to transfer our skills through the learning process and build up more capacity in that organization because the folks were learning OD while they were experiencing OD. And then we were very intentional about the integration of theory and practice. We also leveraged Barry Oshry's work around power and systems as an undergirding and foundational work. So we have AI, the integration of Barry Oshry's work, and then Eileen is involved and wrote a book that's really very powerful. We also used it in our curriculum, communicating meaning CMM model that we also integrated. So here we have distinctly three theories of practice that we're engaging that really focused on elevating dialogic processes, elevating the voices of people throughout the organization. And then we had AI summits for 3 years in a row that build upon each other. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I'll share some of the results so you could, disseminate it through, but it was a really powerful experience. The hardest part was recognizing that we did our work, recognizing on their side and then even recognizing on our side that we did our work and it was time to exit for them to engage in the work. And that just happened within the last month, just within the last month. But it was really powerful. We're very confident about the relationship. We did some other community based work with them, and they show up as a really powerful community member in lots of ways. In one particular way, one woman who was a young woman who was on the DI Council, she lived and breathed the work, and she became the community liaison that brought back all the data, and then also helped to learn around how to design different ways to engage the community. That's the one that sits on my heart right now. That was really powerful for sure.
Thank
And
you.
mine's pretty high level. So I was focused on driving the people side of optimizing our supply chain operations for a particular project. And the overarching goal that we had was to just improve efficiency while maintaining employee engagement because it was going to be a large scale operational shift. And so three key things, ways we approached it. One, it was a data-driven approach where we use workforce analytics to identify the specific skill gaps that were there and to align our training with the operational needs. But then also collaborative change management. Our cross-functional teams work closely with each other to ensure that the goals were clear and communicated, and then also create an avenue for continuous feedback. But then the last thing, I know we've talked about this several times, Jeff has talked about it, that employee-centered design. That part was super important, where it was important for us to involve the employees in the process, recognizing that leadership didn't have, all the answers. And so ensuring that the input or the feedback that they gave helped to shape the new workflows, which we saw increased buy-in and reduced resistance from our employee population. And so we found that it was effective because it aligned our operational goals with our employee development. And so it made the change both sustainable and well received because the employees, were bought in through the process. And so by addressing both the technical and the human elements, we saw, as a result, improved performance and higher engagement as a result.
And thank you. And you touched on something I'm curious about, sustainability. So in your different interventions, how many times did you approach the work and have to start from square one again? And
Oh,
then
God.
and my follow-up question to that is, how long was the entire intervention? Jeff, you kind of shared that yours was a multi-year process because you came back for the AI Summit, but yeah, just two follow-ups. How many times did you have to start over from the initial design? And then how long was the entire intervention?
Yeah, so Amazon has three things that we consider. One thing we try to always drive is a day one culture, so it's always fresh. And we look at decisions at two ways. We look at decisions as a one-way door or a two-way door, right? One-way door are those decisions that if they don't go well, there's no way for us to turn back from them. And obviously the two-way door is the opposite, that they're decisions that, hey, sometimes stuff happens, but you can change it. We try to index on two-way door decisions more than one-way door decisions because we recognize that we're not always right. We may not always get it right. And so for this particular thing, the team that I support, I guess high level, all of the Amazon devices that I hope you have in your home, the team that I support drives the supply chain for all of those lovely things. And so when you think about the work that they do, they're doing it way in advance of when it gets to your house and it's in your hand. So whereas it seems like it would be long processes because we're looking, years in advance, it's really not that long when you consider the amount of work that goes into it. So you're talking about multi-year processes, but because we are a two-way door company, we start over a lot because we recognize we drive innovation, right? And so it's okay to go down the road. It's okay to lose money. The goal is to not lose money the same way again, to not make the same mistake the same way again, but to learn from it and to recognize we have a new SVP of the organization that I support. He actually is even challenging that for us to go back and even look at the failures that we had to make sure we understand why we failed, right? And is it something that we could have done differently that could have made that failure into a success? So we index a lot of time on doing some things. I like to say do it over just because it's the most simplistic way, but at least revisiting them several times.
That's great. You hear that a lot in tech, especially like from startup culture, but I think in big tech too, it's you got to fail forward, right? And you got to fail fast. That's what makes Amazon Amazon. That's what makes Meta, Google who they are, because they're failing, but they're learning from those failures. And I don't know if we give ourselves enough grace to do that, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about this doctor. That we talked about it, right? I'll defend in November. But what's interesting is I've changed my dissertation twice throughout this process. I've gotten, and I'm talking about like well into chapter two, and I'm like, yeah, this is not working the way that I thought. And so I think it's okay. I do think if I had had different experiences in my career, I would have probably put this, degree to the shelf on the shelf and not look back. But I think you're absolutely right. Giving yourself the grace to fail forward, learn from it, and don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
I think that's really critical because, and you could build that into the system. It sounds like Amazon is doing that. It's certainly one of the things that, you know, when I was working internally and then certainly externally, just talking to folks that, what do you learn from this situation? What are you learning from this situation? What did you learn? And then internally and externally, putting out there, especially if you want people to understand and learn the business, that there is a dynamic of taking risks, right?
Hmm.
And then one organization that I worked for, and he actually owned the biggest part of the business. One of the things that we said we wanted to do was reward people for taking risks, even if it didn't go the way they expected. Exactly what you were saying, Kevin. So we started giving out awards. I remember sitting around the senior table, and the other folks said, "Why the hell would we want to do that?" That's exactly, they might have even used more choicer language than that. But we talked about the dynamic that people are learning the business while they're doing it. And if the rationale that they were using and making the decision was a really sound rationale, why punish them for the
Hmm.
result? Or why
Hmm.
punish them for the result?
Yeah. Yeah. Because all of the innovative technology or best practices that we love, those were risks at one point, right? I can't remember who I was talking to or what organization they worked for. I think it was Meta. I actually think it was someone who was a part of a workforce layoff and was like, well, where would you like to work next? And they're like, I want to work there again because they just really invest in innovation and they give a space just to just break things. And you very rarely hear that from organizations.
I mean, but you think about our disciplines, right? Like HR didn't start where it is, right? OD didn't start where it's evolved to now. Somebody
Hmm.
had to start it, somebody had to, go down a path, and determine what the best practices are. And even those continue to evolve. And so it requires some, looking at things, determine what's working, what's not working, what's sustainable, what's not sustainable.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go into our last question, which is a nice segue into the one question or comment that we got in the chat. So, part of the reason I wanted to do this, like I mentioned at the beginning, was just seeing so many different OD programs close. Um, our program at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, which Jeff led, sunset earlier this spring. Like I mentioned, very close to us in the Bay Area. USF's program is sunsetting, and there's been quite a few others. American University, and feel free to call out any more that you're aware of, but um, our field, I don't want to say it's dying, but we're losing we're losing future practitioners, which is really scary. So how do you see the future of OD evolving given these higher ed program closures? I'll start there and then I'm gonna go into Normandi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Then we'll go into their questions.
Great.
And Kevin or Jeff, whoever
Yeah.
wants to
I'll,
answer
I'll,
it first.
I'll start off, since it was such a new experience, And it was such an interesting experience. So in Philadelphia, certainly our program, which is a master's in organization development and leadership, and then what I call two other fusion OD programs, the public health leadership and population health leadership programs. So it was interesting dynamic because there is the political side and then the real side of higher the tensions and the experiences and the storms that higher ed is actually facing right now. Um, but if I looked at our story, one of the dynamics of our story was that here we were housed in a medical university, 3 campuses that we also have. And then the sponsor of our program, who's the VP of graduate programs, actually the founder of the graduate programs, decides to retire. And I told my faculty, I said, this is a different dynamic because the leadership of the medical university are all physicians. And then the way they count effectiveness is totally different than the way that we would count effectiveness. So one of the dynamics that I thought was really important was to also try to demonstrate, like we talked about early, the whole system value, because a number of aspiring physicians and other clinicians were taking our courses either as full degree or maybe upwards to 24 credits in their different programs. So we talked about what that looked like. And then I'm also a former executive in healthcare. So, certainly familiar with the dynamics there. But the financial model was no longer tenable for them. They were so used to having big programs, and then our program is a small program. It was a mighty and dynamic program, but it was one of those things where other disciplines did not understand what OD was all about at that point in time. And this was coming off of I think it was the year, maybe 2 years before that, I was given this big award from the university for being something of the year, or whatever the award was. But it was given, offered up and nominated by the students that all went through my program, not just my students, but the students across the university, where people understood that honing their interpersonal skills, understanding systems would be really critical to their own career. So one of the things that popped for us was, how do we model this sunsetting as OD professionals in such a way that for our students, our faculty, for the university, in such a way that it would be a powerful representation of who we are. So I think we did that really well. The other thing though we talked about was we needed another container, and I think some of you heard me use that word again. We needed another container to hold the space. So it wasn't just our program that closed, but Cabrini University, that had a PhD in OD, closed in Philly. So we needed a container for not only our students and faculties and alums, but also Cabrini and others. So what I decided to do was support and go back in and assume a role as co-chair of the Philadelphia Region OD Network, with the goal of providing a container for practice, just like a Bay Area ODN, and then have an opportunity for learning experiences to come into play, purpose exactly what your purpose is, for sure. And we'll be coming back because you guys are a little bit ahead of the journey. The history of PRODN was that we received a lot of international awards, and then we would drop off into an abyss. And then from a life cycle standpoint, we have to pull ourselves back up. So we have, Kevin, you'll like this. We actually have one of the students, a good friend of Taylor's. He's doing his doctoral work on building a sustainable community of practice for PRODN. So we're actually in that process, looking at how that could happen. And uh, probably 20 years ago, I was part of ODN's strategic committee, and we looked at what made um, regionals successful or sustainable over time. So we're back to the future again. And I see this transition probably 1 year, 2 years, and just pass it off. Because I did recognize that I probably was the central person as far as the OD community in Philly was concerned. So I knew I needed to step up and do this. I'm in retirement, but I'm doing a lot of consulting practice, retirement from higher ed. I did some work for Purdue University, and somebody helped me reframe it. I'm actually in preferment. I'm doing work that I love to do.
There you
That's
go.
that's where I'm
There
at.
you go.
Yeah.
No, I think because not just OD, HR is also facing some of the same thing has been for pretty extended amount of time. And so I see the future both like shifting more toward like those practical skill-based learning as opposed to right the traditional higher ed programs that we're used to. And so I think we'll also see a rise in certificate programs, those micro credentials, right? And I also think because companies do still value it, even though there may not be that traditional setting, I also think that you'll see an increase of on-the-job training that's going to be focused on agile methodologies, and data analytics, and even digital transformation. I think you'll see some combination programs right through like MBAs and all of those things where you can, add in those micro learnings to support where or to pick up where those traditional programs left off. I also think you'll see that technology, my my evil twin, will continue to play a central role because there's that growing reliance on AI and analytics for decision making and people management. And so I think the expertise of HR and OD practitioners will be able to drive that adaptation by helping industries, whether that be through consulting, right? Getting creative through consulting or those entrepreneurships. We'll help them to be able to drive that adaptation by driving tech fluency, by also doing a little more to learn how to integrate those digital tools with human-centric approaches so that we can advise companies in this spaces because they're not the pros, right? But we are. But then also, I think the most important, we'll see an increased demand for strategic partnership. The strategic partnership between HR, OD, and business leaders. I think we'll see an increase there because will still be needed to push the businesses to deepen their understanding of not only their operations, but also deepen their understanding of their operations while maintaining a focus on fostering that inclusive environment, that adaptive, innovative environment to build those strong organizations. And so while the formal education programs that we're used to may look different, there'll still be a need for continuous learning and adaptation. And so there's a great opportunity for the existing practitioners to jump in there and, as we talked about earlier, to show that value and show the ways that leaders or potential leaders, future leaders, can grow their muscle memory in this space through the non-traditional pathways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kevin, I think you're right on target. And then because we're having leaning towards entrepreneurialism is I'm working with a couple different people doing exactly what you're saying as far as like building practices. We've done a couple different things around helping organizations create their own universities that integrate all of this, all the practices, and I think is really valuable. I did see one question in there, and I think it's one thing that's probably holding for the USF folks, the other students, that question that we didn't answer for the aspiring OD professionals, if we tied it's exactly the opportunity to differentiate yourself, demonstrate your skills, your curiosity, try to learn more skills as you're growing, staying certainly staying ahead of the curve as far as the skills are concerned. Networking, you know, Bay Area ODA and other organizations that have OD focus. The networking is really critical. That's where, you know, relationships are built, jobs are opening. I just had a person text me today. She said, "Do you know a person at this organization?" Because they knew that we actually had a collaborative partnership with that organization. I said, "Yeah, the VP of Culture and OD graduated from our program." She said, "I saw a
Mm,
job there. Here's the
wow.
connection." Yeah, so there's a connection there. There's an opportunity there. And the commonality is that even though we had three graduate programs, they all graduated with us. And then we've had uniform events where people got a chance to meet each other. So this, you know,
Hmm.
there's opportunities anytime an event occurs. You know, instead of getting depressed about it, look for the opportunities
Hmm.
that are open to you. Look for the doors that are open to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, One of the other questions we got around this was, what does this sunsetting of programs tell us about OD's identity and staying power? And I think you really touched on this, Kevin, because I see it as an opportunity to really identify those non-traditional practitioners, right? Because the work isn't going to go away. And I think we've done such great work in OD. A client of mine always says OB because when he was in school about 40 years ago, it was OB. But I think enough leaders understand the value and they're going to make two decisions like, okay, I know that I need this and I'm not the person to drive certain change within my organization, or I like this and I want to be able to adopt these behaviors into the work I do, and the folks with the folks that I work with. So I see our identity evolving into something new, and I hope, you know, I know we're not going to go away, but what my hope is that more leaders can take an OD and an HR mindset in the way that they work, to be more holistic leaders. Oh, we're getting some more questions. And I want to make sure I answered all of the first ones.
Can I take that one
What
from Kelsey?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Sure, go ahead.
So that's interesting. You say that that's actually what we call it at Amazon, organizational effectiveness. Yeah. And it's
Mm,
interesting because when I first the first tier that I had in that organization, when she told me her team, I was like, "What is that?" Like, because I didn't know, what it was. And then when she explained it, that was my exact response. Like, "Oh, you're OD." And so I do think that it's just like everything else, right? Like for Amazon, for the longest we were HR, and now we're PXT. I think that functions are steadily trying to rebrand to ways that are more attractive, that honestly more aligned, or that's more catchy, that something that sticks, right? And so when you think about development versus effectiveness, the word effectiveness, it rings, it does something different than what development does. So I definitely think you'll see that quite often.
hmm. Yeah, I think it gives a more positive feel, right? Like development means that you have work to do, right? That you're not perfect, but effectiveness gets you closer to perfection. It also reminds me of how HR suddenly transitioned into people. And it was around the time that I'm moved to California from Philly, and all the jobs were people this, people that. And I'm like, okay, wow, they're like really innovative over here on the West Coast. So I think people gives that, you know, HR has always been challenged with um being HR has a lot of challenges, but really being recognized that HR is really for the people. That's my belief as someone who works in HR. Like, we are for the employees. Yes, we're there for the company, but like in my experience, we're there more for the folks who work there, right? But so many people don't see it that way because they've had really negative experiences with HR for one reason or another. So I see that adoption of people being a solution to that, right? It's more friendly, it's more lighthearted. It seems like you're more in alignment with the people who sit within the organization.
Yes.
I want to honor everyone's time and I want to honor all of our questions as well. So I think to close this out, Normandy's question was, what can be done to continue to evolve our field, and is evolution happening at all? I will let you go first on this one, Jeff.
Yeah, I think evolution, turbulence creates the opportunity again. So there's evolution. And this question has been going on for 30 some years. It's not a new question. However, one of the things that I am fully appreciating is the energy. One of the challenges that I thought we faced, and I remember at NTL and NDN, ODN, and everything else, was that we didn't open up enough space for younger people, right? What I see now and experience now is that younger people are coming to the forefront with leadership. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that this was an irritant to me was that people that were like the old guard, the people that were, and that this isn't everybody, but they were holding on to information instead of sharing information.
Yep.
Now I see sharing going on, which has always been a dynamic of everybody in the community in Philly in particular that I thought was really very valuable. People didn't hold on to stuff. They had the belief that if I give it away, it's going to come back tenfold. Um, and that's what I would like to see for the field, that there's an opportunity. One of the other things I saw a thing around people that are coming from the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector is really embracing OD. So there's an opportunity to engage even more so with the nonprofit sector. I'm involved in a lot of great projects, OD centered along with anti-racism work, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And I'm really excited about it. I jump off the plane in Miami, jump in my car in Philly and drive up to Allentown where they're doing like this amazing work. They're doing this amazing work and feeling like I have the opportunity to make a contribution with people that want to do amazing work and make a difference in the world. Keeps me going for sure. The other thing, and I'm gonna just throw this out, it's like a minute, maybe we're just 30 seconds over. I wish we could use our skills to design town hall meetings for these politicians that could really be a difference maker. Because the polarities that we live in now, I believe we have the skills to make a difference. Um, I offered it up to a couple of friends and everything else. Their paradigm was so entrenched. That's the only word. They didn't want to test it out. But I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. If one guy is a frat brother, it might work out, Kevin. It might work out.
Wishful. And I'll just end on a quote. I'll plus one everything just said. I'll just say, and this is somewhat of a philosophy for mine, but where there is no space, carve it out. All right. Innovation and growth, they thrive in rooms that you create.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Thank you.
Kevin, let us know when you finally get, when you get it. It's about another month when you defend. Put it out
Yes.
there. We're going to
So can't
celebrate.
wait.
Well, this was great. This is exactly what I envisioned a couple months ago, when I had this idea. So I thank you so much, Dr. Jeff, and soon to be Dr. Kevin, for just sharing your insights with us, your willingness to join us, after a busy workday. I have to put an additional plug in for our event next month. Like I said, get your early bird tickets. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for you. If you're not in San Francisco, October is a great time to visit. So maybe plan, a long weekend, next month. But thanks again. And we look forward to, seeing you all next time. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.